Hello everyone, we are super excited to have you here, excited about the topic that we'll get to have today. We really appreciate your time for coming here to listen. Thank you so much. We need you to stay present at the end of this video, so stay tuned. Before we start our presentation, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself and my group members. I'm JIHANA Abbas and we have ARNEIGH HIERRO, CLARENCE TRINIDAD, Claire EDGIELENE MAMANGON, JULIEN SERISOLA, JOVAN LABRAMONTE, John PARAGAT, and we are the reporters for today's lesson. Global versus differentiated models. Number 1. Gestalt. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. In German, Gestalt means the way the thing has been put together. Essentially, Gestalt theory argues that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That means that one cannot understand the parts of something to understand the thing as a whole. For example, you were given the components of a motor. They would have no value unless they were combined to create a car. The central principle of Gestalt psychology is to emphasize our tendency to integrate pieces of information into meaningful whole. When trying to make sense of the world around us, Gestalt theory suggests that we do not simply focus on every small component. Instead, our mind tends to perceive objects as parts of a greater whole and as elements of more complex system. Number 2. Phenomenological or humanistic. The humanistic perspective arose in the mid-20th century in answer to two theories, Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory and B.F. Skinner's behaviorism. Thus, it was referred to as the third force of psychology. Its foundation includes philosophical humanism, existentialism, and phenomenology. This branch of psychology relates to the idea of being entirely unique. It suggests a way of evaluating an individual as a whole rather than looking at them only through a smaller aspect of their person. It emphasizes personal worth of individual, the centrality of human values, and the creative nature of human beings. Number 3. The psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is defined as the set of psychological theories and therapeutic methods which have their origin in the work of Sigmund Freud. The primary assumptions of psychoanalysis is the belief that all people possess unconscious thoughts, feelings, desires, and memories. According to this theory, there are three structures of personality, namely known as id, ego, and superego. Id resides completely at the unconscious level, acts under pleasure principle. Next is the ego. Ego resides in all levels of awareness and it operates under reality principle. Ego attempts negotiation between id and superego to satisfy both realistically. And lastly, the superego. Superego is the morality and idealistic part of personality. It resides in preconscious that operates in ideal principle. Number 4. Self-personality divided into traits. Example: Big 5 factors. Personality traits are understood as patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are relatively enduring across an individual lifespan. The 5 broad personality traits described by theory are extroversion, agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. Openness is the trait feature characteristics such as imagination and insight. People who are high in this trait also tend to have a broad range of interests. They are curious about the world and other people and eager to learn new things and enjoy new experiences. Conscientiousness. This dimension includes high levels of thoughtfulness, good impulse, control, and goal-directed behaviors. Highly conscientious people tend to be organized and mindful of details. They plan ahead, think how their behavior affects others, and mindful of deadlines. Extroversion. Characterized by excitability, sociability, talkativeness, assertiveness, and high amounts of emotional expressiveness. People who are high in extroversion are outgoing and tend to gain energy in social situations. Being around other people helps them feel energized and excited. Agreeableness. Personality dimension includes attributes such as trust, kindness, affection, and other pro-social behaviors. People who are high in agreeableness tend to be more cooperative, while those low in this trait tend to be more competitive and sometimes even manipulative. Lastly, neuroticism. Neuroticism is a personality trait that is characterized by sadness, moodiness, and emotional instability. Individuals who are high in this trait tend to experience mood swings, anxiety, irritability, and sadness. Those low in this trait tend to be more stable and emotional resilient. Number 5. The self is divided in two dimensions: physical, biological, emotional, behavioral, social, moral, and spiritual. Physical biological dimension of self. Physical self dimension encompasses safety, health, nutrition, movement, physical touch, and sexual needs, while biological self brings psychosocial concepts and theories of development together with those of brain structure and function that underpin and influence adaptation across the lifespan. Emotional dimension of self. It involves awareness of your feelings, emotions, and dealing with stress in a positive way. Spiritual dimension of self. Spiritual aspect is the person's consciousness on higher values in life. It involves exploring the key principles, beliefs, and values that give meaning, purpose, hope to live, and fulfillment in life. Moral dimension of self. This dimension has to do with person's awareness of the difference between right or wrong. The social dimension of self. Concern for the values, norms, rules, and roles that emanating form of cultural dimension.
Real versus ideal self concept. What is idealized self and real self according to Horney? Idealized self, a feeling alienated from self. They create an idealized self-image. It is an extravagantly positive picture of themselves. Horney says that the ideal self is the type of person we feel that we should be or what we want to be. What is real self? It is a self-realization of who and what we actually are. Rogers has these two concepts about self: the person-centered theory and the self-actualizing tendency. What is person-centered theory? According to Rogers, it is identify that each person has the capacity and desire for personal growth and change. Rogers termed this natural human inclination actualizing tendency or self-actualization. What is self-actualizing tendency? It is our innate tendency, our core desire to fulfill all our needs, both physically and mentally, to express our true selves, and most importantly, to become all that we are capable of becoming. Self-actualization occurs when a person's ideal self is congruent with their actual behavior.
Karen Horney's psychoanalytic social theory. On the first box, it is stated, being alienated from selves, they create an ideal self-image. It is an extravagantly positive picture of themselves. So, many people, when they are alienated to themselves, they have many wishes that they want to be achieved, and it will create a question to themselves. So these dilemmas can be solved by only creating an ideal self-image. On the next box, Hornies recognize the three aspects of the idealized image: the neurotic search of glory, neurotic claims, and neurotic pride. In neurotic search of glory, it means that individuals begin to blend the reality to their ideal self into all aspects of their life's goals, self-concept, and relationship with others. Neurotic claims. They proclaim that they are special and thus entitled to be treated in accordance with their idealized view of themselves, believing that something is wrong with the outside world. Because these demands correspond to their ideal self-image, they fail to recognize that their claims of special privilege are unreasonable. A neurotic pride is a false pride. On the other hand, is founded on an idealized picture of self and is frequently publicly declared in order to maintain and support a glorified sense of oneself. The last box stated the incongruence lead to self-hatred. So, people cannot be satisfied with themselves at this point because they will begin to hate and despise themselves when they realize that their true self does not meet the obsessive expectation of their idealized self.
Self-image in the neurotic made by horny. A healthy person in a real self has a thinking that he or she can do everything in a positive way, while a neurotic person thinks ill of himself. If it is said that a healthy person is capable of doing something well, he would do it in a positive way. After thinking about his ability to do this thing, whereas a neurotic individual believes that he may not be able to do it well, or which is called vacillation. Self-image in the neurotic by Horney states that self is split into despised self, which is the feeling of being hated by people around you, and assume that the hated being is your true self. And the ideal self, which is an idealized version of yourself created out of what you have learned from your life experiences, the demands of the society, and what you admire in your role models. Therefore, the neurotics swing back and forth between pretending to be perfect and hating themselves. Horney called this inner battle the tyranny of should and the neurotic striving for glory. These two impossible selves prevent the neurotic from ever reaching their potential. In addition, one's ideal self is created when one feels they are lacking in some area of life and not living up to the ideals that they should be.
Carl Rogers was a humanistic psychologist who agreed with Abraham Maslow's fundamental beliefs. However, Rogers stated that in order for a person to grow, they want an atmosphere that is genuine, accepting, and emphatic. Relationships and healthy personalities will not develop properly. Without this, just as a tree cannot grow without sunlight and water. Rogers defined the formative tendency as the natural desire or tendency of all living organisms to develop and evolve. It is a person's innate desire to develop and grow, seeking to grow in the direction of an ideal self while also contributing positively to society. The basic concept of actualizing tendency is simple. All living things have a desire to grow, and this desire is present in all living things. We all desire to express ourselves artistically and realize our greatest potential as human organisms. He utilizes the metaphor of a potato to illustrate his point, claiming that if you put a potato in soil in the spring, green sprouts would sprout shortly after. This process, a desire to grow, can be seen in everyone, though Rogers felt it was true of all organisms. Organisms are driven by an inner desire to exist in harmony with their real essence. When the organism is unable to do so, it feels incongruence but continues to strive for actualization, despite the increasingly complex environment. From flowers sprouting between concrete cracks to corn stalks growing between road grades, all organisms have this tendency.